Assalamualaikum. This video is talking about nonverbal communication, speaking without words, used by Americans. We can compare nonverbal communication between Americans and Indonesians. And we can also compare it to other countries or to other cultures around the world. Talking about nonverbal verbal communication, mostly people experience this, and mostly eyes can indicate or assume what people want to talk or indicate the message of what people want to say. For instance, it is talking by American police officer toward someone. He said, "He didn't look at me once. I know he's guilty. Never trust a person who doesn't look you in the eye." So, in this case, eyes have an important part in saying something or speaking something without words. And even people, when they feel guilty, he or they do not look at someone else. And someone who doesn't look directly means he never trusts a person. So it can be called never trust a person who doesn't look you in the eye. It's a kind of proverb. And Russian Russians feel strange when someone see them. When you pass Russian and then you take a glance or staring to him, I mean a Russian, he um he feel that we is strange. And what Russians thinking about people who are staring them is um, our smile at strangers means um, s- means weird. Okay, now talking about verbal and non-verbal communication, language studies traditional emphasized verbal and written communication since about 1960s. However, researchers at that time, in the meantime, seriously began to consider what takes place without words in conversation. In some instances, more non-verbal than verbal communication occurs. For example, if you ask an obviously depressed person, "What's wrong?" and he answers, "Nothing, I'm fine," you probably won't believe him. When an angry person says, "Let's forget this subject, I don't want to talk about it anymore," you know that he hasn't stopped communicating. His silence and withdrawal continue to convey emotional meaning. And One study done in the United States showed that in the communication of attitudes, 93% of the message was transmitted by the tone of the voice and by facial expressions, whereas only 7% of the our emotions and attitudes more non-verbally than verbally. We can say that non-verbal speak aloud than verbal. I'm sure that you have listened to my explanation about verbal communication. It is stated here that verbal and nonverbal communication plays an important role in how people interact with one another. People are using around 35% verbal communication and 65% nonverbal communication in daily life. Nonverbal communication has also cultural meaning. The most important thing is communication is to hear. The most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being heard. That's why I call it verbal or non-verbal communication speaks aloud than verbal communication. Okay, can you see the diagram there? Nonverbal communication includes facial expression and then tone and movement, appearance, eye contact, gesture, and posture. What is acceptable in one culture may be completely unacceptable in another. One culture may determine that snapping fingers to call a waiter is appropriate. Another may consider this gesture rude. We are often not aware of how gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, and use of space affect communication. In order to correctly interpret another culture's style of communication, it is necessary to study the silent language of that culture. Talking about gestures and body positioning, gesture are specific body movement that carry meaning. Hand motions alone can convey many meanings. Come here, go away, it's okay, and that's expensive are just a few examples that can be expressed non-verbally using only hands. The gestures for these phrases often differ across culture. For example, beckoning people to come with the palm up is common in the United States. This same gesture in the Philippines, Korea, and parts of Latin America, as well as other countries, is considered rude. In some countries, only an animal would be beckoned with the palm up. And as children, we imitate and learn to use these nonverbal moments to accompany or replace words. When traveling to another country, foreign visitors soon learn that not all gestures are universal. For example, the OK gesture in the American culture is a symbol for money in Japan. And the same gesture is absent in some Latin American countries. This is why the editors of a Brazilian newspaper enjoyed publishing a picture of a former American president giving the OK symbol with both hands. And many American business executives enjoy relaxing with the feet up on their desks. But to show a person from Saudi Arabia, Thailand, the sole of one's foot is extremely insulting because the foot is considered the dirtiest part of the body. And can you imagine the reaction in Thailand when a foreign shoe company distributed advertisement showing a pair of shoes next to a sacred sculpture of Buddha. And besides, facial expressiveness carry meaning that is determined by situations in relationship. For instance, in American culture, the smile is typically an expression of pleasure, yet it also has other functions. A woman's smile at a police officer doesn't carry the same meaning as the smile she gives to a young child. A smile may show affection, convey politeness, or disguise true feelings. So it depends on to whom you give your smile. It also is a source of confusion across cultures. For example, many people in Russia consider smiling at strangers in public to be unusual and even suspicious behavior. Yet, many Americans smile freely at strangers in public places, although this is less common in big cities. Some Russians believe that Americans smile in the wrong places. Some Americans believe that Russians don't smile enough. In Southeast Asian culture, a smile is frequently used to cover emotional pain or embarrassment. And Vietnamese people may tell the sad story of how they had to leave their country, but end the story with a smile. Pain, if you feel pain to your leg, is conveyed by grimace, which also signifies disgust or disapproval. Surprise, shock, or disbelief can be shown by raising the eyebrows. A wink given to a friend may mean you and I have a secret, or I'm just kidding. Between a man and a woman, a wink can be flirtatious. Our face, our faces easily reveal emotions and attitudes. People's faces reveal emotions and attitudes, but we should not attempt to read people from another culture as we would read someone from our own culture. The degree of facial expressiveness one exhibits varies among individuals and cultures. So the fact that members of one culture do not express their emotions as openly as do members of another does not mean that they do experience emotions. Rather, there are cultural restraints on the amount of nonverbal expressiveness permitted. For example, in public and in formal situations, many Japanese do not show their emotions as freely as Americans do. More privately and with friends, Japanese and Americans seem to show their emotions similarly. Many teachers in the USA have a difficult time knowing whether the Japanese students understand and enjoy their lessons. The American teacher is looking for more facial responsiveness than what the Japanese student is comfortable with in the classroom situation. And given individual differences, it is difficult to make generalizations about a cultural style of communication. Americans express themselves facially in varying degrees. People from certain ethnic backgrounds in the United States may use their hands, bodies, and faces more than other Americans. There are no fixed rules, although it is considered negative or suspicious to have a deadpan expression or poker face. Some people can be read like a book, others are difficult to read. Okay, this is the diagram of how we communicate verbally using words, what we say, and paraverbal indicates it is indicated by tone, how we say it, um, lower or higher, and using nonverbal communication by gestures or body language, facial expressions, posture, and so on. Eye contact can be indicated as nonverbal communication. I talking about eye contact. It is important because insufficient or excessive eye contact can create communication barriers. That's why eye contact is very important. In relationships, it serves to show intimacy, attention, and influence. As with facial expressions, there are no specific rules governing eye behavior in the United States, except that it is considered rude to stare, especially at strangers, like what I've told you before about Russian. In parts of the United States, however, such as on the western coast, in the south, it is quite common to glance at strangers when passing them. For example, it is usual for two strangers walking toward each other to make eye contact and then smile and perhaps even say hi before immediately looking away. This type of contact doesn't mean much. It is simply as a way of acknowledging another person's presence. In general, Americans make less eye contact with strangers in big cities than in small towns. People would be less likely to make eye contact in bus stations, for example, than in more comfortable settings such as university student center. Patterns of eye contact are different across cultures. Some Americans feel uncomfortable with the gaze that is sometimes associated with Arab or Indian communication patterns. For Americans, this style of eye contact is too intense, yet too little eye contact may also be viewed negatively because it may convey a less of interest, inattention, or even mistrust. The relationship between the lack of eye contact and mistrust in the American culture is stated directly in the expression, never trust a person who doesn't look you in the eyes. So, you know, when you have interview, it's important to look directly to the eye. It indicates the trust to a person. In contrast, in many other parts of the world, especially in Asia countries, ASEAN countries, a person's lack of eye contact toward an authority figure signifies respect and deference. So, talking about nonverbal communication include tone of voice, facial expressions, posture, use of space, and hand gestures, full body movement. That indicates good communication matters and indicates what you are really saying. Okay, um, by posture, you can see to the posture and position of this person and also the appearance, how uh, his hair is trimmed, haircut, and then how his face is and how the warm smile is and how he feel confidence. And what about the dress, using formal dress and his firm handshake means he respect to someone he meets. And yeah, this is the correct body posture. It looks confidence from him by his posture. Nonverbal communication express meaning or feeling without words. Universal emotions such as happiness, fear, and sadness are expressed in similar nonverbal way throughout the world. There are, however, nonverbal differences across cultures that may be a source of confusion for foreigners. It's well known that good communication is the foundation of any successful relationship, be it personal or professional. It is important to recognize, though that's though that it's our nonverbal communication, our facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, posture, and tone of voice that speak the loudest. Now, what is nonverbal communication in business? It's very important when you meet client in business or in conference, and we cannot be apart from nonverbal communication. Even though we use communication, we communicate verbally. Nonverbal communication has been defined as communication without words. It includes apparent behavior such as facial expression, eyes, and touching, and tone of voices, as well as obvious messages such as dress, posture, and spatial distance between two or more people. Everything communicates, including material object, physical space, and time systems. Although verbal output can be turned off, nonverbal cannot. Even though we stop to speak, but nonverbal cannot. Even silence speak. Unconsciously, we all keep a comfortable distance around us when we interact with other people. This distance has had several names over the years, including personal space, interpersonal distance, comfort zone, and body bubble. The bubble is like invisible wall which define our personal space. This space between us and another person forms invisible walls that define how comfortable we feel at various distances from other people. The amount of space changes depending on the nature of the relationship. For example, we are usually more comfortable standing closer to family members than to strangers, right? Because um, they are our family. Personality also determines the size of the area with which we are comfortable when talking to people. Introverts often prefer to interact with others at a greater distance than do extroverts. Cultural styles are important too. A Japanese employer and employees usually stand farther apart while talking than their American counterparts. Latin Americans and Arabs tend to stand closer than Americans do when talking. For Americans, the usual distance in social conversation ranges from about an arm's length to 4 feet. Less space in the American culture may be associated with either greater intimacy or aggressive behavior. The common practice of saying, "Excuse me," for the slightest accidental touching of another person reveals how uncomfortable Americans are if people get too close. Thus, a person whose space has been intruded upon by another may feel threatened and defensively. In cultures where close physical contact is acceptable and desirable, Americans may be perceived as cold and distant. Cultural does not always determine the message of nonverbal communication. Context, personalities, and relationships also influence them. Therefore, no two people in any one society have the same communication cannot be completely separated from culture. Whether we emphasize differences or similarities, the silent language is much louder than it first appears. Now, please take a look at how they handshake from forms and short because actions speak louder than words from their eyes, from their posture, their dress, that they are ready to get business. And how can the same gestures be treated differently in different cultures? This gesture using by Egypt and then Italy and Greece have different meanings. In where Egypt, it means be patient. Italy means what exactly do you mean? And for Greece means that's gesture means that's perfect. That's just perfect. And by a facial expressions, it has or it expresses meaning or feeling, whether happiness, fear, sadness, etc. And how different when you make a sign by hand. This gesture means okay in USA and UK, but in Japan it means money. In Brazil it means insult. In Russia it means zero. And we've discussed it in verbal communication how these cultures of countries have are different. So how we understand them, we can analyze by the color or which is impolite and which is polite and which is impolite. For Chinese, it is impolite to open gifts when received, and also you have to remove your shoes before entering someone's home. If you are invited to someone's home, you should always bring a gift in the hostess. When receiving and offering business cards, always do it with both hands and never write on it. And what about friends? You should always dress well, and it is better to be formal than to casual, and do not give anything with the number 13. It is bad luck for friends, to friends people. It is okay to open gifts when received, and handshake is common way of greeting, but friends may greet by kissing on both cheeks. And what about Koreans? Do not wrap your gift in green, white, or black colored paper. And you should never sign or write anything in red ink. When eating, the eldest or senior person should eat first. When meeting someone, the person of lower status should bow to the person of higher status first. Okay, those are signs of nonverbal communication by hands. It is can be called as semantics. Semantic means study of symbol, sign, or words. Yeah, that's those are also the meaning of signs using hands and eye contact. is a key characteristics of nonverbal communication. Expresses much without using a single word. In American culture, maintaining eye contact shows respect and indicates interest. Eye contact also establishes the nature of a relationship. And talking about haptic communication or touch is communicating by touch. Touch or haptics is a characteristic of nonverbal communication and used when we come into physical contact with other people. For example, we use handshakes to gain trust and introduce ourselves. And posture, how you carry yourself, tells a lot about you. How you walk, sit, stand, or hold your head not only indicates your current mood, but also your personality in general. For example, if you cross your arms while standing, you indicate that you may be closed off and defensive. Meanwhile, walking with your head down and avoiding eye contact with others may indicate shyness. There is advantages of nonverbal communication in business. By nonverbal communication, when you meet your client in business or when you are in conference or seminar, nonverbal communication means control, means complement and substitute of speaking, and it is aid to verbal communication. Sign or marks of identity. Color as powerful means of communication. Pictorial representation of mass communication. Arousing stronger response, contradict, restate, or emphasize. And for illiterate people. And the disadvantage of it are incomplete communication, problem in feedback, quite inactive in some areas, no or less of effect after the occurrences, lack of flexibility, greater possibility of exchanging fraudulent message, encoding and decoding problem, differences in nonverbal cross-culture cues, cross-culture, absence of permanent record, necessity of cultural knowledge, dependency on technology, and wide possibility of distortion of message. And this is the questions, and I'd like to conclude here, conclude about our discussion, our my presentation in nonverbal communication. Because the United States is a nation of many minority groups, blacks, Mexicans, Chinese, Italians, Jews, Japanese, Koreans, Arabs, Vietnamese, etc. It is difficult to make generalizations about American nonverbal communication. For example, touching behavior among Mexican Americans differs from that to Anglo Americans. For the Anglo Americans, touching is more restricted. The Anglo American male rarely touches or embraces other males, and distance is usually greater between men in the Anglo American culture than between men in the Mexican American culture. And talking about the distance, physical distance, it is written by Edward Hall in his book entitled The Hidden Dimension, discusses four categories of informal use of space among white professional class Americans. For intimate friends, the physical distance is to contact is 18 inches, and for friends and personal conversation, the distance is 18 inches to 4 feet. For impersonal conversation, the distance is 4 feet to 12 feet, and for public speaking, the distance is around 12 feet or more. And during the farewell stage of conversation, Americans will often move gradually away from each other and decrease eye contact. This, of course, is not a rule, but it does happen. For example, it was nice meeting you, and you know the distance is 1 foot apart. How hope to see you again sometime, and the feet is 6 feet apart. Take care. It is at 15 feet apart, and I would like you to show your culture in distance indicates nonverbal communication or other parts of nonverbal communication you have in your culture. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.